So, RingCentral acquires the events platform from Hopin, and generally most of us wouldn't even care, except that you should care. Hello and welcome. My name is Roger Courville, and we've got something a little different for you today. We're going to call it a reaction video because, in a way, this is not just about a deal between two companies. This is something that affects this industry, virtual events and hybrid events, webinars, in a way, streaming, in a way that is going to have reverberation for time to come, whether it's RingCentral, it's Hopin, it's StreamYard, it's Zoom, and maybe it's going to touch down for you. So one of the things that you know about us here at Virtual Venues is we're kind of a platform agnostic crew that helps you get to your goals by tying your very specific use case and objectives to a specific platform that help you get to interactions and engagements and the data that falls out of that so that you can get where you need to go. And hey, if you've ever thought about going beyond the basics, I'm glad that you've joined us for yet another conversation where we welcome back to this thought leader conversation V2's co-founder and CEO, Aaron Cole. Aaron,
hi, Roger.
What the heck just happened, and why is this a big deal?
That's a great way to start. What just happened? So this is kind of one of those things where I think when you first hear it on face level, you might just read that article or that title and then move on. But there's a lot in here that really are likely going to be impactful for what we do in our world. So with the acquisition of Hopin by RingCentral, I think we first have to acknowledge that this was a long time coming, and this was something if you're in the industry and if you kind of watch the way these things change, and it's been a crazy ride for the past 3.5 years here. This was kind of something that I think everybody kind of expected, where we all really watched Hopin with their timing of the market and their just literal explosion into the world as the adopted virtual event platform. $1 billion in investor funds. I think at one point the top valuation was $7.5 billion when they were at the very highest level. Saw that just massive rocket ship going up. But then obviously a fairly precipitous drop down because of the changing market, the retraction, everything that we've gone through, in the past couple of years. It was kind of an obvious outcome that Hopin needed a runway. RingCentral, when you look at it from the holistic standpoint, RingCentral makes sense as the eventual suitor. They very clearly are looking to expand into the unified communications environment, and this does complement what they're looking to do. So it might not be one that you would say, aha, that makes complete sense, but it does, when you kind of drill into it and look underneath the hood, it does kind of make a lot of sense. I do think, to your point, that again, what's not said in the press releases and where they are already starting to push the Hopin product is really what we're talking about here today, because there's some potential big changes in how that is going to affect our market.
Yeah, and and ultimately along the way here, and Aaron and I don't have a script clearly, but we do have a lot, if not way too much experience. And along the way, we want to position this in a way that touches down for how this might affect you as an end user, right? You're the senior director of marketing at blah, 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 or whatever that happens to be. But history repeats itself. And in a way, this is my opinion. This is just my opinion. Aaron and I haven't even talked about this, but in a way, I believe that we're seeing RingCentral do is parallel to what we saw Intercall do along. Oh, yeah. So when I left Microsoft in 2004 and I co-founded a company, we built a registration platform, and we ended up building a company that we sold to Intercall that went on to become West and went on to become Intrado, right? Huge telecom company. And every telecom company has been trying to figure out, what do we do now that we can't just charge for conference calls in the same way that we've been charging for conference calls, right?
Exactly.
And so they got into way back when, web conferencing and then video conferencing and now unified communications, and they're trying to put packages together that provide a one-stop shop for your company. And they hit different strata in the marketplace in different ways, right? Like Cisco can sell you all of that stuff alongside the Department of Defense and some rather massive global scale people. And then there's a bunch of other people. Zoom's trying to do it.
Right.
Intrado and, that crew has been trying to do it. And RingCentral, who is a public company, has been moving in this direction. And they've got a suite of products that could be one vendor instead of multiple vendor relationships for that IT buyer. And now they just swoop in and scoop up this thing from Hopin, to Aaron's point, scoop up this thing and add it to their portfolio. So that's important for what that implies for just unified communications in general.
Right.
And we'll get to that. It says something about Hopin, to your point. They literally got $1 billion of money in 3 years, and now they have some fire sale and sell off a chunk of it for $15 million.
$15 million.
It's going to have reverberations for other aspects of the industry, including, I would even argue, and we'll get to that, for how Zoom is doing what they're doing with Zoom meetings, Zoom webinars, Zoom events, and GoTo's on a similar path. So,
exactly. Yeah, and don't forget Microsoft as well as a unified communications partner or provider. That's a very common target for these companies. Again, like you talked about, the larger legacy telco companies that have been scratching their heads trying to find a way to replace that revenue that is very rapidly drying up from phone type communication platforms. Unified communications is a no-brainer in their mind. And for a RingCentral, which they're exactly in that market and exactly in that situation, to your point, it doesn't even sound like this acquisition is going to have an impact on their balance sheet because they are so much a larger company. But again, it's what are they going to do with it and how are they going to spin that is where I think we're both saying, from our world and how this affects the people that we work with, it's going to have a major impact.
Yeah. There was even a quote from, and I forget if it was in their 10Q or in RingCentral's 10Q. There was even a quote from like the CFO or somebody going, "This isn't even material."
I saw that.
Which is actual, literal, financial, legal language.
We don't expect this to have an impact on our financial statement or something like that. Wow. I know.
This is kind of like our lunch budget. we bought a few extra beers on Friday, and that
exactly.
That's platform.
Yep. So pretty crazy stuff for sure.
So start with, and just in case you're dropping in, you wondered what the heck this title was. We at V2, we've been platform agnostic for a long time. We've been really deep with Hopin. Yep. And then Hopin acquired StreamYard, and we still do work with that. And they kept StreamYard, right?
Yes.
And correct. So, Aaron, my question to you, and obviously we're asking a similar kind of thing. What do we think the events acquisition means for the users of RingCentral?
Yeah.
In terms of what that means to their portfolio, and then we'll kind of broaden out to the bigger industry.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Very clearly. So RingCentral currently has a webinar-based product, which is very similar to a Zoom type designed product. Where Hopin now fits is in what they're rebranding as RingCentral Events. So the minute you get past running a single webinar, the minute you look at needing to run multiple concurrent events or have an ecosystem that people are logging into to participate for a day, a week, a month, whatever, the minute you get into that larger ecosystem, that's where this product fits. And that's no different than what Hopin provided from the very beginning when they went live in 2019. It's that larger ecosystem to be able to have, again, virtual events, which is the defining characteristic for them. And so that's why it does fit fairly well in the RingCentral portfolio, is because there is not something currently in there. They have that webinar product. I would not be at all shocked in the next couple, code cycles, if we don't hear about an integration to be able to pull the RingCentral webinar product directly into like a Hopin session, for example. That might be a little bit of a gateway for legacy RingCentral customers to begin using the Hopin platform, for example. But very clearly, one of the things that I've seen as an agency of Hopin, so we're kind of following along in this whole journey. RingCentral very clearly is planning to roll this out to their existing client base, which is tens, thousands of existing businesses as the very first low-hanging fruit. And they likely will have success with that, again, because it's outside of what they currently are at, and it complements it fairly well.
Yeah, and I think that's an interest. Well, I'll say this in as we maybe transition to saying now, what does that mean for the bigger industry? And maybe even we'll then come back to talking about a couple of the things that RingCentral said that were their positioning points, right, about AI and what they're intending to do. But I just want to point this out, both in terms of, I want to describe the use case, but also then point out where else that fits within the industry, because the word webinar, event, live stream, all of that kind of gets muddy because different, when the word means different things, then it kind of means nothing. I'll use one example. So I'll use Zoom as an example to begin with. Zoom has Zoom meetings for smaller collaborative things, and then they have Zoom webinar, right? And Zoom events is like this wrapper that goes around it, and you can have a Zoom meeting or a Zoom webinar as the sessions. So if you imagine a multi-session, to your point, it's a multi-session day or even a multi-day event where you have a keynote and then several breakouts and then back to another keynote, and you got a vendor area where you can go talk to vendors and places where you can handle handouts and other assets and even virtual networking or things that fit into that kind of context. That is not a new use case. That's been around for a long time. People tried to solve that in virtual worlds like Second Life. There have been, team crews like Unisphere and who got acquired by all way back in the day, who have been building these things that are wrappers that provide all of this additional function. Like, I need a place where I can go mimic the vendor area so people can go over there and meet with the sponsors. And then I need to herd them all into the main hall for the keynote, which you might run on 24, and then we break them out into breakout rooms, and you're going to the Helen's room and I'm going to the Rainier room, and those run on more collaborative platforms. So there's a platform, moment to connection technology, and then there's this wrapper thing that goes around it. Right? And so WebEx bought Socio to do that very kind of thing, right? So Cisco or WebEx meetings, WebEx webinars now has this wrapper called WebEx events. Zoom's doing the same thing, and bam, it looks like that's exactly what is touching down for RingCentral. RingCentral originally, this is about 10 years ago or so, originally built their meeting platform on Zoom, right? That was a Zoom partnership. And then they built their own thing, and then Zoom sued them, and then they countersued back and whatever. So I don't think it's built on Zoom anymore, but if it looks like Zoom, there's probably
there's a reason. Exactly.
So I think to the point is, RingCentral has proven that they've been successful as a fast follower. Here is something that's already going on. They didn't innovate something here. What they did is they just bought some technology from Hopin for really cheap that saves them a whole lot of testing and development time.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly it. And I do think, to your point, again, this is not necessarily, even when Hopin came out in 2019, this had been tried, and the virtual environment type of an idea had been around for a very long time. I feel Hopin succeeded because they followed the mindset which is one thing that we tend to talk about a lot at V2, which is that the technology should not ever get in the way of the messaging of the event. And so we're not necessarily creating avatars or these crazy branded interfaces that people are walking through, but we are providing, to your point, a very effective way for you to get people into an environment and to listen to the keynote and then to go to a breakout that you want, and you go this, you go there, and it's very simple. It's focused on the messaging and on the content. I think that's one thing that they did that really differentiated themselves. And the second thing is the emphasis on video and having that new code base that they were able to develop in 2019 is light years different from a legacy style platform that is now struggling to keep up with changing and improving code bases, because they have almost like in the basement of their code base, they have a lot of baggage that they're still working through. And I think that's another reason why they did so well. All of it makes a lot of sense. And, all of us, when we were in the throes of COVID and watching Hopin's rise, and I would be the first to agree that, a valuation of $7.5 billion seems pretty extraordinary. But there's $1 billion of money from people that was put directly into that company, because there obviously was a pretty big belief that they were onto something. And so that to me is the proof in the pudding, and again, come full circle. That's absolutely why this probably was a screaming deal for RingCentral. It had to happen. It did happen. And then now where are we going? And that's where, to beat the dead horse again, that feels like that's going to be pretty interesting to watch.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a couple ways that touches down. If somebody's listening here and going, maybe even evaluating whether they would want to use V2 as a vendor, to me, there's an argument probably for going, this is one reason why it might be useful to have a vendor, a production company who is fluent in more than one platform. Yes. There's an angle with regard to where RingCentral is going, because now we are kind of, in a sense, grandfathered in with partnering with RingCentral, because of,
very much so.
We've been so deep with the Hopin events platform for so long, and I think there are industry implications for it because of at least two things that RingCentral has rolled out. The way they're talking about AI and the way they're talking about disruptive pricing.
Yes.
Could be transformative, because it's going to have ripples with regard to how other people are thinking what they're doing.
Yep. And exactly. And in my mind, that's where things get real interesting to watch. The AI part is pretty interesting, because I think from our standpoint, that very clearly has been a RingCentral injection into the roadmap of Hopin. Right. Hopin, prior to the acquisition, I can't say this for certain, but I certainly don't remember reading a lot about AI-driven initiatives in their roadmap as they were pushing their platform. AI in our world, and pretty much the entire world, it's kind of like that's the buzzword that everybody's talking about, and most platforms. Sorry, what was that? I missed that.
Everybody else's world too. I mean,
right, exactly. It's everywhere. I was even thinking we should come up with like some like Terminator AI index, Roger, for AI type things, because it seems like you're on this spectrum. You're either on one side where you're of the belief that AI is going to save you, millions in man hours and creative labor and stuff like that, or on the other side, call it the Sarah Connor side of the spectrum. You're a little bit leery about where that takes you, But regardless of it, it's a big buzzword, and most platforms, when they look at AI, they're looking at it obviously from a content creation assistant standpoint, helping to write blurbs, helping to craft emails, helping to find snippets in your archives that are what they define as the high point, and then providing you a very nice little editable piece of video file that you can then take and post and repurpose your content, for example. Pretty smart stuff, no doubt about it. That's exactly where RingCentral is going with their AI elements of it. And I don't believe, again, that was directly from Hopin. So in some ways, I think that might be something that RingCentral, having just got into this market, they're like, that's one of the first things that we need to push forward,
I think there are I think, it remains to be seen whether or not they are just on the bandwagon or they do
Yes.
something with it. And I think
Right.
that's true for everybody, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
I started in this industry in 1999 when anything that said .com was worth $1 billion, right?
Right. And it does feel like that.
Out there was
Yeah.
racing to add .com, RogerCourville.com.
Right. Yeah. No, it does.
Its valuation, and everything is AI right now. And
Right.
you're right. At the moment, to me, the most obvious places tend to be in content creation. Can I go generate new ideas with regard to titles or descriptions or that kind of thing? And it was so quickly advancing. The world doesn't even really know where it's
I know.
down yet.
Right.
I think one of the great opportunities that I haven't seen anybody talking about yet, and this is to me where the rubber meets the road, is where it begins to touch down in production.
Yeah.
Right. So I worked with, I won't name the company because I was under NDA at the time, but I worked with a company as a consultant quite some years ago that were in the process of building out a wizard that would help you as you were setting up your virtual platform for a session. This wizard would walk you through things that would help you apply engagement. So you take the way that you want to think about engaging people, but it would walk you through that and help build out the tools in the configuration that you wanted, such that you could then be more engaging. And it wasn't just, I just scheduled a poll. It was like interacting with you.
Yeah.
That was just purely in a fuzzy logic sort of way. That wasn't with an AI thing. I mean, this was pre-AI. Yeah. So potentiality for driving labor out of the process and or getting creative in terms of helping people be better is pretty stunning. But I think one of the things that they just kept coming back to with RingCentral is AI first, AI first, AI first. And to me, if there's an opportunity that they have, it's that it's not just this events platform. It's the fact that every call, phone call, video call, virtual event, or whatever that they have under this very big umbrella of unified communications, every one of those is a data point. And and you being able to learn and grow with the assistance of AI, to me, could be huge.
Yeah. Yep. And I do think that we'll have to see. It is pretty interesting. I do think I've seen a much larger push with RingCentral assets, before the Hopin acquisition, being much more cognizant of that potential with AI. And it does feel like it is a little bit reactionary. Again, kind of shoring up where Hopin may have been a little bit lax in that, pushing these kind of what I would call fairly standard ways to implement AI into a platform that you're doing events off of, as a way to kind of get that more on an even playing field.
Yeah. Here's why I don't think it takes over the world anytime soon. As Aaron will corroborate, I've spent a lot of time with AI because I'm also using it to do part of my doctoral research, and I'm figuring out where and how it can help with how much I need, a volume of content I need to sort through. I can tell you that unless you really have honed your skills as learning the prompt engineering process, it's hard to get out of AI stuff that is more than just fascinating at this point. I'm sure it'll get there. Yeah, but you can't just go, hey, write me a blog post and have it write a blog post that sounds as wise and sharp as a human being. And I know I've trained it on my whole website, my 4 books, and all the papers I've written. I trained an AI chatbot on that and said, hey, write something that sounds like Roger Courville, and it still can't do it. The reason I say that is because the value of professional services and human beings being involved, right? If it could take over the world, then you don't need marketers, you don't need presenters, you don't need virtual event producers like the crew that you hire at V2, and all of that's baloney, right? It might be able to assist, but it's not the be all end all. Yeah. We'll see.
So it'll be interesting to see. It's a hot topic, and it's interesting. To your point, across the world, everything is involved in it, in terms of kind of seeing where that goes. So
this is a lot more practical, though. Talk about what they described as disruptive pricing.
Yeah, I want to go back to that, because
they're on something.
That's the term. That's the term that you see from the CEO through press releases. Disruptive pricing is the way that they're describing how they're reconfiguring the pricing model of Hopin. And if we go away from this conversation with nothing more than that as an asterisk of something to watch, I think it would be that, without a doubt. And so, again, looking at what they paid right now at the minimum, $15 million for the code base of Hopin, which has such a small, if negligible, impact, they can afford to largely almost give that product away in an effort of adoption, in an effort of market saturation. And it does kind of feel like that's where they might be going. And that goes right to that disruptive pricing. So we're talking about a licensing model that pre-Hopin was, before Hopin was acquired, the minimum acquisition or licensing for Hopin was $17,000 a year. And it sounds like that from a starting point is going to go down to $750 per year at a lower attendee threshold. That's a sea change. And again, they can afford to do that. They can afford to roll that out to their entire population of existing RingCentral clients and blow the doors off of the adoption rates of Hopin. And where I think that truly becomes disruptive, it's not only disruptive for people that are going to be obviously, saving money quite a bit when you look to license a Hopin platform, but it's disruptive potentially massively for the rest of the market. It's inevitable. We are going in through a period of consolidation in platforms right now. And I don't know of a lot of startup companies that are in this market that could probably compete with a threshold level of $750 a year. It is so low. And I think that will very likely cause consolidation to speed up to warp speed. And I think I can't help but wonder if that's a large part of the larger play of where RingCentral is going, because they can afford to do it, So that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, kind of go back to that description of the use case, right? So
yep.
Of sessions or events is this thing that kind of wraps around other things, right? So part of using RingCentral events means you will also be using RingCentral meeting, transport technology, webinar, or streaming technology. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of the glue that kind of brings all of these things together and adds that kind of social component. Like, oh, I also need to have an event where I have some vendors show up and want to do virtual networking as I'm using this to facilitate community in a different way than just a one-to-many webinar or something like that. Yep. And they were talking about it being like $750 a year, for like functionally like all you can eat, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, right. So from $17,000 to $750, that's a massive change.
Right. But here's the thing. Over time, labor increases in price and technology commoditizes, right? It decreases in price. One of the things that I've often seen, I'd be curious to even though that's disruptive at on the technology side of the equation, I'd be curious to get your kind of executive take on the overall equation, right? Because the expensive part of doing an event, you're gonna have an event. I don't care if it's at the local conference center or virtually. The expensive part isn't renting the room. The expensive part is hiring speakers and sending out enough invitations to get 500 people there and providing chicken or fish for lunch or whatever you're doing, right? So it's it's not spending $1,000 on the room. It's all the other stuff that goes on, not the least of which is the labor of the meeting planning crew and all of the work that goes into serving that 500 people that are going to show up.
Yep.
or whatever. I'm just curious if there's an executive take from your perspective, given your unique space in the industry.
Well, and I would say it's evolving, because I think the variable with the analogy that you talked about is very apt, because you've got the room, the roof over your head, but what goes on inside of that's obviously what people are, interested in seeing. And also where you have to spend the most of your creative environment, energy, labor, all of that stuff. To what degree these systems become more and more autonomous with helping to simplify the time it takes to do things. So like, for example, another thing we haven't even touched on here yet, but is talking about, where is RingCentral going to be taking the Hopin code base in terms of features and functionality. There's an argument to be made that the overall simplification of that, and by that I mean, set your Hopin event up in 10 minutes, and because now it's all automated. Now you have a very easy thing that pretty much anyone can do. The flip side of that, though, is you potentially sacrifice some of that level of customization, and from our standpoint, some of that level of professional production that is exactly what usually will stand out in an event when you're doing an A to B comparison. So it does kind of depend on that. It does kind of depend on where they are going to take that code base if we're talking about Hopin. But overall, I think you've got a very good point. As an event planner, it's easy to get fixated on that, hey, I rented a room here or whatever. And they're going to provide me with chicken. So I'm just going to go with chicken, and now I'm going to work on something else. That's a deceptive way of looking at it, because there can be a lot of other things that are a part of that you might not be thinking about ahead of time. Production from us with the clients that we work with every day of the week is obviously a very, very big part of what they're doing. And that is difficult, at least in our world right now. We'll see where AI is in 5 years from now or 10 years from now. It's very difficult to replicate that. And so that's always going to be there, if that makes sense.
Well, you mentioned we hadn't yet talked about features yet, so I'm going to propose we at least knock down at least two more things before we're done. One, they did announce, RingCentral did announce a few forward-looking features, a couple of which I think are worth noting, because I actually think it could drive what happens in the broader industry, and could be very interesting to somebody listening to this going, oh, that sounds like it could be interesting. I got to spend fall of 2024, and that just might be interesting. And then the second is what this might mean for other components like StreamYard or the streaming, those transport vehicles. So with regard to like the features, the kind of the forward-leaning features, I mean, of course, they kept saying AI first over and over.
AI.
They did mention a couple things that I thought were interesting that I haven't seen in other platforms in the same way. One was AI-driven video editor.
Yes.
Right. So like if anybody's been doing any poking around in the world at all, there's at least 24 vendors out there where you can upload a long-form video like what we're doing right now, and it will automatically extract little 2-minute segments for your social media.
Yep.
Haven't seen that built into anybody's platform, like WebEx or Zoom or something like that. That could be interesting. Yep. AI-driven groupings in terms of questions and breakouts. So there are some platforms that WebEx, for instance, we serve WebEx, right? Where in WebEx webinars, you can have questions that get prioritized in the queue based on, say, somebody's profile when they register, right? Oh, I want the people who identify their title in the IT space. I want their questions to get prioritized relative to everybody else, right? That kind of thing. So having AI being able to group questions or summarize questions, going, we got 1,000 people here. 4 people asked a question that was about like this, so that we catch that. That could be interesting. And similarly, breaking people out into breakouts based on some kind of fuzzy logic, as opposed to it simply being driven by somebody's registration profile. Could be interesting.
Those are interesting. Yeah. No, and I agree. And I think that you can look at those feature sets and you can recognize in them continuations of some of the things that those are definitely things that Hopin, I again, go back to what I was saying earlier in terms of maybe not including the AI elements of it so that it does it for you, but including the idea of the design, where in the Hopin speak, you're designing ticket types, which then allow you to identify and allow a registrant to identify to a specific, in this case, job or occupation or whatever, IT manager, marketing manager or whatever, and then using that information on your registration data to cleverly create positive interactions between those segments of people, So, and another thing that we've talked about with Hopin that I still really like is that what everyone calls speed dating, where you can, if you choose to participate in it, you can just do this round robin with meeting people for a set limited amount of time. You can define that based on those ticket types, or again, to your point, eventually based on AI-driven metrics that the platform is sniffing out. That is pretty interesting. Absolutely. Right. And I think it's a great idea because it, again, just helps to make that event more memorable and more meaningful. I think it goes all the way back to what even I mentioned a while ago, which is that the value of the content, the value of what is in it for me as an attendee is that's the tail that wags the dog all the way across the board. And finding ways to do that, these are great examples of it.
So if you are still listening with us and you go to virtualvenues.com and look at our blog or look back through there or use the search function on our website, one of these thought leader conversations that we've done in the recent few months was with one of our program managers, Danica McIntyre, and she and I talked at length about this. I hate the speed dating, speed networking thing, but that's what it is, right? It is a really cool thing because it is so different than the typical webinar kind of experience, right? It adds a peer-to-peer connection that is missing in a lot of broadcast kinds of virtual events, which aren't wrong, but it adds that dimension that is often missing when we think of what an event is.
Right.
Exactly. In an in-person sense. So anyway, go find that one with Danica McIntyre, and it's the word Hopin's in the title, easy to find. Talk to me about StreamYard, because Hopin purchased StreamYard, then kept StreamYard, and that has probably other implications too. Talk to us about streaming stuff.
That's another kind of asterisk in my book when I'm looking at this and what we've been watching. So you're exactly correct. StreamYard was a startup company that Hopin acquired 3 years ago, I don't remember. And they very actively, let me back up. If you're not familiar with StreamYard, it is essentially like a virtual mixing platform where, similar to what we're doing here today, where you can do lower thirds, you can do backgrounds, you can do picture-in-picture kind of things. Its use case is for you if you don't have necessarily a full-fledged professional production background, but just need a way to have it look good and have that, be something that you can then stream to YouTube or whatever. Hopin acquired that, and the first thing that they did was to build out an integration so that directly goes into a Hopin main stage and now a sessions environment, which was smart because the out-of-the-box tools that Hopin has, if you're just going to run an event in Hopin events, I think it's safe to say that fairly quickly, from a production standpoint, you're out of tricks to use, so to speak, and you are kind of fairly limited with what's available to you. So that was always something that made a lot of sense with that partnership. To your point, that wasn't a part of what went over to RingCentral. It does look to me that at least on some level, Hopin has developed or reused some of the code base from StreamYard, so that they are in the process right now of rolling out a Hopin type studio that has some of that functionality. But I do think that's an area of interest and something that we as professionals are pretty interested in, because StreamYard is a good tool, and StreamYard, where they were going as a developed platform, if that was in lockstep with Hopin, I think you would continue to see those benefits, mutually beneficial benefits across both platforms, and that's not going to be here anymore. And so I am interested to kind of watch and see where Hopin goes. And I think it's completely possible that RingCentral might not provide the same emphasis on quality production and that ability to produce things at that higher functionality that StreamYard is currently doing or will be doing in the future.
Yeah. Well, in part because of and I think some of this, I'm going to put a really big asterisk on this because I think some of this remains to be seen. But we know who RingCentral is.
Yeah.
Right. RingCentral, I don't know where they're at in 2023, but they had more than $2 billion in revenue in 2022. Right, which is why them spending $15 million to buy the Webex or the Hopin events platform is
not even negligible, right?
Words of their CFO, and provides some really interesting stuff. But to the point that you just made, if you like that little higher touch and what might it be like for me to be able to fly in another image or use these lower thirds or that kind of stuff, that very well could remain the kind of thing where StreamYard and they're still part of Hopin, and they've had a much more, say, for instance, focus on like agencies and production and some of that higher touch kind of stuff. It'll be interesting to see where they take that. And that sometimes, to me, it's some of those little details that help us distinguish what platform might be best for you. When
Absolutely.
It's going, hey, what platform is best for your event? Yeah, okay, great. You use Zoom for everyday meetings. That's great, but that doesn't mean that's what you necessarily should use for your upcoming user conference or your upcoming new, 1 week of new employee onboarding that's global or whatever program you've got going. And I think it'll be interesting to see to where those go. And I think it's fortunate for us that we can work with clients and just say, hey, it doesn't make any difference which one has which. Yeah. You don't have to choose. We'll help you figure out the right one. And
I love that. I love being able to do that.
Technology. And hey, if 6 months from now on your next one, we need a different technology, we'll use that then.
Right. Exactly. I love being able to do that. That I think is one of the things I'm most proud about. If I can get on my soapbox, the V2 soapbox, I love having that ability to be able to diagnose exactly what it is that we're trying to accomplish or we need to accomplish, and then finding the right solution based on feature sets and abilities, not on licensing agreements. I'll put it that way. I think it's a great value. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, I know that sometime in the next couple of weeks, we will talk separately about things that we've seen more broadly in the industry in the last, 12, 18 months and where we think things are going to be going in 2024. Yep. And so if you're still listening to this, we certainly appreciate your attention and
Thank you.
And keep an eye out for that.
Yeah.
Aaron, any other questions I should have asked you relative to RingCentral, Hopin, and this thing that I haven't asked you?
No, I think we're good. I just can't help but kind of marvel at how interesting of an industry we're in, and this is one to watch for sure. This is one, again, where it's like what's below the surface is probably going to be way more important and interesting than the little bit that's what's above. And we're going to watch and see, as a user of Hopin, as a user of StreamYard, now as a user of RingCentral and all the other systems that we work on, it's our job to watch this, and it's obviously something that we're taking a wait and see approach on, and we'll just go with it. So I can't think of anything else, Roger, but to your point about us meeting later on here, I'm excited about that conversation too, because it's been a crazy year, and this is just one element of it.
Yeah. And maybe I'll close. My final comment will be this, and maybe just using a verbal illustration to put an exclamation point on something that you described a little earlier. Broadly speaking, a lot of companies, including Zoom and Microsoft, they're broadly going after unified communications because that's where all of the daily meetings happen, all over and over and over, right? I need collaboration via Teams, and then I need basic video meetings that I'm doing day in and day out. And then, but you think about the logarithmic curve, that's the volume of meetings.
Right.
And a whole lot fewer of those meetings, like 1% of them, have scale that have a whole different set of requirements because it's a company all hands meeting, or it's part of my marketing series that operates very differently than my day-to-day
Right.
IT Scrum meetings or that kind of thing. And to me, if there is something to keep an eye out for, it is where and how do the UC-driven companies, unified communications-driven companies, begin to not serve events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because inevitably, one of them is very much a horizontal play. Oh, we're integrating meetings with events, with instant messaging, with asynchronous collaboration via, SharePoint or, tool chat, chat tools and stuff like that. And that's a horizontal integration as opposed to events, which are very much a vertical thing because there's a life cycle. I have to start working with you a year in advance or 3 months in advance. And then there's registration and there's a whole bunch of things that don't exist in our typical daily meetings. And then there's what do we do with all those assets and all of how that happens after the fact, right? So that 3-day event has its own life cycle, but it's its own distinct thing that is so different than our typical day-to-day collaboration. And Go-To is moving in the direction of unified communications. You want to know where Zoom's going? There we go. Where has Microsoft's been leading this in a crazy way that nobody's even acknowledged because, and this is a several year old statistic, but Skype, this was 5-6 years ago, Skype had 1/3 of the audio minutes in the whole world. Right. Yeah. The largest phone company in the world was Skype. And everybody went, why is Microsoft doing?
There's why right there. Yep.
So, and that's not wrong. And I accept to say that, because Aaron and I both worked at Microsoft, except to say that's their broad horizontal play. But what does Microsoft not do well?
Right.
Virtual events.
Right.
Yep. And so there's something to keep an eye on just because you've got a platform that it functions as a telco. That doesn't necessarily mean they do events well. That doesn't mean they can't help you have 10,000 connections, but that's different than doing a great virtual event.
Right. You know what? And one thing, just I know we're closing up here, but kudos to RingCentral for realizing that they even needed this within a whole UI type of environment, because again, that's where they're going. They realized they needed this as an element of that toolkit. And so at the very top level, I'm willing to say kudos. Good job for that, because, we're of the same feeling that is an essential, even if it's a seldomly used comparatively to the millions of meetings that are happening on that collaborative basis. This is the one that everyone talks about because your CEO is on the call. Your CEO is making company-wide announcements on your job status or whatever it is. If something goes wrong, this is the one that everyone's going to talk about, not your weekly, collaborative meeting on marketing sessions or whatever it happens to be. So even though it's relatively small, it's hugely important. And I would be remiss not to give credit to RingCentral for understanding that and moving towards it.
That is a killer place to close. You're exactly right. RingCentral has done a lot of things right over the years, and this very well could just be a total coup relative to scooping up Hopin events for $15 million.
Fire sale.
With that, we're glad that each and every one of you kind of hung out with us for a little bit. If you've got questions or thoughts, please shoot them in, or depending on where you're watching this, drop them into our, the comments on the YouTube channel, or just send Aaron a note, Aaron@virtualvenues.com, or me, and we'd be happy to dialogue with you. And if you disagree, heck, we'll have you on the show. Let me know. We'll put you on camera, and because here's the thing. One of the ways that we win, that we believe at Virtual Venues that we all win, is that we all win together. Virtual events is its own unique little family, and it gets to be a small world after a bit. And I promise you that that one of the things that you'll find that it's just part of the ethos of virtual venues is that we want to help you succeed, even if you don't ever give us a dime. And we know, we just trust in a big, broad, universal sense that comes back to us. And we've been really blessed to do what we do. And we're really honored to serve who we serve. And we'll be interested to see where RingCentral takes this, because they've made some good moves.
Yep. Agreed. Thank you for your time, Roger.
Thanks to each and every one of you. And we'll catch you on the next episode of Thought Leader Conversations.